She and the children laugh and shout, and romp in and out of the room. At last Nora hides under the table. The children rush in and out for her, but do not see her. They hear her smothered laughter, run to the table, lift up the cloth, and find her. Shouts of laughter. She crawls forward and pretends to frighten them. Fresh laughter. Meanwhile, there has been a knock at the hall door, but none of them has noticed it. The door is half opened, and Krogstad appears, lies wait a little. The game goes on.
Excuse me, Miss Helmer.
With a stifled cry, turns round and gets up onto her knees.
Excuse me, the outer door was ajar. I suppose someone forgot to shut it.
Rising.
My husband is out, Mr. Krogstad.
I know that.
What do you want here, then?
A word with you.
With me?
To the children, gently.
Go in to nurse. What? No, the strange man won't do Mother any harm. When he is gone, we will have another game.
She takes the children into the room on the left and shuts the door after them.
You want to speak to me?
Yes, I do.
Today? It is not the 1st of the month yet.
No, it's Christmas Eve, and it will depend on yourself what sort of a Christmas Eve you will spend.
What do you mean? Today is absolutely impossible for me.
We won't talk about that until later on. This is something different. I presume you can give me a moment?
Yes, I can, although...
Good. I was in Miss Olson's restaurant, and I saw your husband going down the street.
Yes?
With a lady.
What then?
May I make so bold as to ask if it was a Miss Lind?
It was?
Just arrived in town?
Yes, today.
She is a great friend of yours, isn't she?
She is, but I don't see.
I know her too, once upon a time.
I am aware of that.
Are you? So you know all about that, huh? I thought as much. Then I can ask you, without beating around the bush, is Miss Lind to have an appointment at the bank?
What right have you to question me, Mr. Krogstad? You, one of my husband's subordinates. But since you ask, you shall know. Yes, Mrs. Lind is to have an appointment, and it was I who pleaded her cause, Mr. Krogstad, let me tell you that.
I was right in what I thought, then.
Walking up and down the stage.
Sometimes one has a tiny little bit of influence, I should hope. Because one is a woman, it does not necessarily follow that... When anyone is in a subordinate position, Mr. Krogstad, they should really be careful to avoid offending anyone who...
Who has influence?
Exactly.
Changing his tone.
Miss Helmer, will you be so good as to use your influence on my behalf?
What? What do you mean?
You will be so kind as to see that I am allowed to keep my subordinate position at the bank.
What do you mean by that? Who proposes to take your post away from you?
Oh, there is no necessity to keep up the pretense of ignorance. I can quite understand that your friend is not very anxious to expose herself to the chance of rubbing shoulders with me. I quite understand, too, whom I have to thank for being turned off.
But I assure you...
Very likely, but to come to the point, the time has come when I should advise you to use your influence to prevent that.
But Mr. Krogstad, I have no influence.
Haven't you? I thought you said yourself just now...
Naturally, I did not mean you to put that construction on it. I? What should make you think I have any influence of that kind with my husband?
Oh, I have known your husband from our student days. I don't suppose he is any more unassailable than other husbands.
If you speak slightingly of my husband, I shall turn you out of the house.
You are bold, Miss Helmer.
I am not afraid of you any longer. As soon as the new year comes, I shall in a very short time be free of the whole thing.
Controlling himself.
Listen to me, Miss Helmer. If necessary, I am prepared to fight for my small post in the bank as if I were fighting for my life.
So it seems.
It is not only for the sake of money. Indeed, that weighs least on me in this matter. There is another reason. Well, I may as well tell you. My position is this. I dare say you know, like everybody else, that once, many years ago, I was guilty of an indiscretion.
I think I have heard something of the kind.
The matter never came to court, but every way seemed to be closed to me after that, so I took to the business that you know of. I had to do something, and honestly, I don't think I've been one of the worst. But now I must cut myself free from all that. My sons are growing up. For their sake, I must try and win back as much respect as I can in this town. This post in the bank was like a first step up for me. And now your husband is going to kick me downstairs again into the mud.
But you must believe me, Mr. Krogstad, it is not in my power to help you at all.
Then it is because you haven't the will. But I have means to compel you.
You don't mean that you will tell my husband that I owe you money?
Suppose I were to tell him.
It would be perfectly infamous of you.
Sobbing.
Oh, to think of his learning my secret, which has been my pride and joy, in such an ugly, clumsy way, that he should learn it from you. And it would put me in such a horribly disagreeable position.
Only disagreeable?
Impetuously.
Well, do it then, and it will be the worse for you. My husband will see for himself what a blackguard you are, and you certainly won't keep your post then.
I asked you if it was only a disagreeable scene at home that you were afraid of?
If my husband does get to know of it, of course he will at once pay you what is still owing, and we shall have nothing more to do with you.
Coming a step nearer.
Listen to me, Miss Helmer. Either you have a very bad memory or you know very little of business. I shall be obliged to remind you of a few details.
What do you mean?
When your husband was ill, you came to me to borrow £250.
I didn't know anyone else to go to.
I promised to get you that amount.
Yes, and you did so.
I promised to get you that amount on certain conditions. Your mind was so taken up with your husband's illness, and you were so anxious to get the money for your journey, that you seem to have paid no attention to the conditions of our bargain. Therefore, it will not be amiss if I remind you of them. Now, I promised to get the money on the security of a bond which I drew up.
Yes, and which I signed.
Good. But below your signature there were a few lines constituting your father as a surety for the money. Those lines your father should have signed.
Should? He did sign them.
I had left the date blank. That is to say, your father should himself have inserted the date on which he signed the paper. Do you remember that?
Yes, I think I remember.
Then I gave you the bond to send by post to your father. Is that not so?
Yes.
And naturally you did so at once, because 5 or 6 days afterwards you bought me the bond with your father's signature. And then I gave you the money.
Well, haven't I been paying it off regularly?
Fairly so, yes. But, to come back to the matter at hand, that must have been a very trying time for you, Miss Helmer.
It was, indeed.
Your father was very ill, wasn't he?
He was very near his end.
And died soon afterwards.
Yes.
Tell me, Miss Helmer, can you by any chance remember the day your father died? On what day of the month, I mean?
Papa died on the 29th of September.
That is correct. I have ascertained it for myself. And, as that is so, there is a discrepancy which I cannot account for.
What discrepancy? I don't know.
This discrepancy exists, Miss Helmer, in the fact that your father signed this bond 3 days after his death.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Your father died on the 29th of September. But, look here. Your father dated his signature the 2nd of October. It is a discrepancy, isn't it?
Nora is silent.
Can you explain it to me?
Nora is still silent.
It is a remarkable thing, too, that the words 2nd of October, as well as a year, are not written in your father's handwriting, but one that I think I know. Well, of course it can be explained. Your father may have forgotten to date his signature, and someone else may have dated it haphazard before they knew of his death. There's no harm in that. It all depends on the signature of the name. And that is genuine, I suppose, Miss Helmer? It is your father himself who signed his name here?
After a short pause, throws her head up and looks defiantly at him.
No, it was not. It was I that wrote Papa's name.
Are you aware that is a dangerous confession?
In what way? You shall have your money soon.
Let me ask you a question. Why did you not send the paper to your father?
It was impossible. Papa was so ill. If I had asked him for his signature, I should have had to tell him what the money was to be used for. And when he was so ill himself, I couldn't tell him that my husband's life was in danger. It was impossible.
It would have been better for you if you had given up on your trip abroad.
No, that was impossible. That trip was to save my husband's life. I couldn't give that up.
But did it never occur to you that you were committing a fraud on me?
I couldn't take that into account. I didn't trouble myself about you at all. I couldn't bear you because you put so many heartless difficulties in my way, although you knew what a dangerous condition my husband was in.
Miss Helmer, you evidently did not realize clearly what it is you have been guilty of. But I can assure you that my one false step, which lost me all my reputation, was nothing more or nothing worse than you have done.
You? Do you ask me to believe that you were brave enough to run a risk to save your wife's life?
The law cares nothing about motives.
Then it must be a very foolish law.
Foolish or not, it is the law by which you will be judged if I produce this paper in court.
I don't believe it. Is a daughter not to be allowed to spare her dying father anxiety and care? Is a wife not to be allowed to save her husband's life? I don't know much about law, but I am certain there must be laws permitting such things as that. Have you no knowledge of such laws, you who are a lawyer? You must be a very poor lawyer, Mr. Krogstad.
Maybe. But matters of business, such business as you and I have had together, do you think I don't understand that? Very well. As you please. But let me tell you this. If I lose my position a second time, you shall lose yours with me.
He bows and goes out through the hall.